Ladies and gentlemen, a marvel of modern ingenuity. High above the skyline of San Francisco, a huge airship glides with majestic poise.
Hang on a minute. Those skyscrapers weren't there a century ago. Something's up here.
You got me. I'm not really a well-spoken, overly enthusiastic narrator from the 1930s. What you saw there was a new airship flying over the west coast of America in 2025.
It would have been a common sight when Zeppelins were the #1 way to travel and carry big objects across long distances. What often gets lost in translation is that these things were absolutely enormous, which means the buildings they were constructed and stored in had to be even larger. While the airship era quickly went down in flames, literally, the megastructures that spawned them didn't.
But what have they been used for in all that time? And why has the purpose of one in particular been kept secret?
A new life awaits you in the off-world colony.
If you've driven through Silicon Valley on Route 101, there's a chance you'll have seen something a bit strange. And those of you who've headed through the suburbs of Akron, Ohio in the last century will surely have noticed this. There's another two 50 miles from London, and this thing just outside Berlin.
If you were paying attention in the intro, then you're probably going to be able to guess what they are. The massive structures that were once used to build and house airships. The question I have is, why are they still there?
Airships have increasing economies of size. The bigger they are, the better they are. But of course, you can only build an airship equal to the size of the hangar you can put it in.
Barry Prentice is a professor at Canada's University of Manitoba, and he's been an airship advocate for decades.
I often say to people that it's not a chicken and egg question in the case of airships and hangars. No incubator, no egg gets hatched. You have to have a hangar in order to build an airship.
And while these hangars all have their own unique stories, it was the Akron Airdock that went on to break records when work began on it in 1929. Commissioned by the Goodyear Zeppelin Corporation, it would become the largest building in the world without interior supports. And as incredible as that sounds, it was actually a lot more necessary than some of the world records we see broken today. Because this thing had to fit these inside, the USS Akron and Macon. These were the largest helium-filled airships ever built, used by the US Navy for long-distance scouting and reconnaissance. They were so big that workers had to climb up huge ladders mounted on wheels to reach the upper sections during assembly. Now, big is a subjective term, I totally get that, so let me help you picture it. These ships were 784 feet from nose to tail, making them more than 3 times longer than an Airbus A380, whereas the Airdock itself was a massive 1,175 feet long and 325 feet wide. That's enough room to fit 130 tennis courts. Add in a 211-foot height, and you've got an area that's so cavernous that if temperature and humidity levels were just right, clouds could form inside.
So yeah, airships really were enormous, and it's crazy now to think that some of them could carry dozens of people across the Atlantic. They had cabins, lounges, dining rooms, everything you need to make that journey in comfort. It's a shame we can't travel like that anymore, but it did get me thinking. If I wanted to float the idea of bringing back passenger airships for the modern age, what would they look like? Well, there'd be a lot more legroom for a start, also convertible flatbeds and champagne upon boarding. Basically, I've got a bit carried away and I've put together an idea, a pitch to investors for Air Force Fred, or B1M Air, where the B of course would stand for blimp. The whole thing has been underpinned and put together by Rayon Design's fantastic next-generation CAD software. If you don't know, Rayon Design is a fully web-based, all-in-one platform that lets you design, edit, document and present architectural drawing sets super fast. And they offer a whole suite of AI-powered tools that are lifesavers when you're juggling deadlines. Let's take a look inside the premium/business class cabin, which I'll be flying in, of course. I built most of this out using Rayon's library of 50,000 plus pre-made CAD blocks, which was more than enough to get me started. But then I thought, what if I give it some 1930s flavour? So I asked Rayon Design to generate a series of custom Art Deco style blocks. Most importantly, this vintage drinks cabinet, because you have to understand this is going to be a very long haul flight. Cheers. Whether you're an architect, an urban planner, or a blimp building wannabe like me, you can try out Rayon Design for yourself for free by scanning the QR code on screen or clicking the link in the video description. Now, let's go back in time again to see how that huge structure at Akron was actually built.
More than 7,000 tons of steel were used to build the giant interconnected truss system that forms the main shell. Because many of these components were prefabricated and fitted together in repeatable sequences, the structure went up surprisingly quickly, in just 11 months.
Its semi-parabolic frame carried loads around the structure, with corrugated sheet metal providing a durable cover. Later it was covered in asphalt and then followed by a rubber skin. But arguably the most impressive part of this building, aside from its immense size, are the two openings at either end.
Yep, I'm referring to those orange peeled doors. When they had to open, it wasn't a case of just turning a handle and pushing, because they weighed 600 tons each. They were placed on wheels that connected to a set of tracks, allowing the doors to roll outwards. But even on wheels, these things were heavy, so a great deal of force was needed to make them move at all, which is why they were hooked up to individual power plants capable of opening or closing them in the space of 5 minutes. Much more advanced than what was found on even older hangars like the UK's very excitingly named Cardington Sheds, just a touch bigger than what I've got in my back garden. But that's because these were built in 1915, during the First World War, and they had a much simpler but more problematic opening system.
They have doors that just slid sideways, and so they slid past the opening of the hangar, but that meant that as the air was blowing around the hangar, they caused turbulence in front of the hangar, so as the airship was trying to get out, they would be buffeted, and of course, you can't hold a big airship like that. And in the orange peel ones, like the ones in Akron, they sort of nest together as they come open.
But the thing is, when you've got aircraft that are designed to travel thousands of miles and operate around the world, you need more than one place to put them, which is where that one in California came in, built on the site of the Naval Air Station Moffett Field. Meet Hangar One. This became the West Coast base for the Macon, allowing it to carry out missions in the Pacific. Unsurprisingly, it had very similar dimensions to that other structure over in the Midwest, but they weren't built entirely the same way. While it too had a steel truss system, Hangar One's heavy use of cross-bracing gave it a skeleton structure instead of a series of arches. Plus, its more rounded shape made it highly aerodynamic, just like the aircraft themselves.
Reducing wind resistance meant less disturbance for the airships when they were leaving and docking, which was helpful considering that we're not far from San Francisco Bay and its windy coastline. Another difference was the choice to line the exterior with a lead-based paint. Now, that was a popular thing to do at the time, but as you can imagine, it became a bit of a problem in the future.
By the early 1930s, several of these giant facilities had been constructed on both sides of the Atlantic, and the airships they were built to serve became a feature of many skylines. And yet, in case you haven't noticed, they're no longer seen looming over New York, Berlin, or the pyramids. Why is that?
All the humanity and all the bad screaming around.
Oh yeah, that.
We've all heard of the 1937 Hindenburg disaster, where the largest aircraft in history was destroyed by a fire in less than a minute. That incident, combined with the rise of jet planes, effectively ended the passenger airship industry. But it wasn't just that. Years earlier, the two aircraft made in the Airdock met a similar fate.
In 1933, 73 died when the Akron crashed in a storm off New Jersey. Then, in 1935, bad weather struck again and took down the Macon, this time on the other side of the US. While most of the crew survived, 2 people sadly lost their lives. You'd think perhaps that in the decades that followed, with the Zeppelin era well and truly over, these great big buildings would also be wound down. After all, what use could there possibly be for them? Well, several uses, as it turns out. For a while, the Airdock continued to make blimps for the Navy during and after World War II. These were smaller than the old airships and non-rigid, which made them safer.
They actually were very successful in the convoys across the Atlantic. When the airships were guiding the convoys, they never had submarine attacks because the airships could easily spot the submarines. So there were like 300 or more of these Navy blimps that were built and flown. And the last ones flew in about 1962.
Since the 60s, the Airdock has found all manner of other uses. It's been a centre for R&D, aerospace and engineering projects, even an office space and a movie set. But it's not quite on the same level as Cardington Sheds, which is now Cardington Studios. Batman has been imprisoned here, Dick Van Dyke loved to sing and dance around the place, and it was a rebel base in Star Wars. Twice. As for that crazy German building we showed you earlier, which used to house cargo airships, well, it's now the world's biggest indoor water park. The story of Hangar One, on the other hand, has been a bit more up and down. After the Hindenburg, the airfield it sits on soon became home to the Ames Research Centre. Founded in 1939, it was one of the main laboratories for the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, or NACA, which went on to change its name to one you might just have heard of, NASA. Then, in the 1940s, Hangar One gained a couple of younger siblings, Hangars 2 and 3. They were smaller, but still huge, constructed even quicker, and made partly from wood. That's because steel was in short supply during the war effort. After the war, these structures spent decades storing various types of aircraft and housing numerous research projects. By the 90s, Hangar One was on the National Register of Historic Places after NASA acquired Moffett Field from the Navy. It was already listed as a Naval Historic Monument, so there was clearly much interest in preserving this iconic landmark.
But by 2003, Hangar One found itself in a bit of trouble, and it was the outer shell that was to blame. Toxins were discovered in environments close to the airfield, toxins that were traced back to the structure.
One of the principal contaminants was PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls. NASA did some excellent forensic work to determine that the PCBs in the wetlands were coming from Hangar One.
Lenny Siegel is a co-founder of the Save Hangar One Committee, a group of environmentalists and veterans who've campaigned for the preservation and reuse of this structure.
And that's when we realized that the skin and roof of Hangar One were this revolutionary material that from the 1930s that incorporated lead, asbestos, and PCBs. Perhaps one of the first known uses of PCBs.
And so it was forced to close, and the roof, sides, doors, and windows of the building had to be removed piece by piece. But that didn't mean everything had to be disposed of. Some of the wood that was taken out ended up in the corporate areas of the new Levi Stadium nearby, home to the San Francisco 49ers. Meanwhile, however, the much older structure that it came from remained in a bit of a sorry state. For years, it sat there, stripped and exposed, with many fearing it could be demolished, even with its protections. Despite strong support for a restoration, nobody had put a plan forward. That was until 2014, when a certain tech firm stepped in to lease the airfield from NASA for a 60-year term.
We got the federal government and NASA to agree to leasing out 1,000 acres at Moffett Field. And one of the conditions for the leasing was that Hangar One be recovered by the lessee. There were 2 bidders. The only one that really had the resources to do it was Google, which formed Planetary Ventures to carry out the work.
The company stumped up most of the funding for a full revamp of Hangar One, which didn't get underway until 2022.
The clang of construction rings out from Hangar One at Moffett Field. Work crews are raising towers of scaffolding for the up-close 3-year restoration work.
Fast forward to 2025, and at last it was more than just a giant steel frame again. The main structure had been cleaned before getting new doors, sidings, windows, a roof, and cladding.
They built this huge scaffold and gradually worked their way across the hangar. It took longer than it took to build the hangar. Perhaps the work was more difficult, but I think people on your channel know that the skyscrapers that were built in the 1930s and the bridges, we didn't have all the rules for protecting the people doing the work. This was done a lot more carefully.
As for why an offshoot of one of the world's biggest tech firms would do this, well, that's still not been officially confirmed. In the original NASA press release, there were some details. It said Planetary Ventures would use Hangar One for research, development, assembly and testing in space exploration, aviation, robotics and other emerging tech.
A director of the company was asked to elaborate on what will happen here after the project's completion. He replied, "We're still working on it, but we're committed to innovation." Right, I guess we just have to wait and find out then. Or maybe they're going to keep those big doors firmly shut, and what goes on inside is going to remain a big fat secret. But hang on a minute, there's still something we haven't explained.
That. You see what it is? It's a blimp flying over the city.
People spotted it. This is the second sighting in the past month.
It's part of Sunnyvale-based aerospace company LTA Research.
It isn't actually a blimp, it's an airship, the largest aircraft constructed since the 1930s. Named Pathfinder 1, it's over 400 feet long, so a fair bit smaller than the giants of the past. But unlike those before it, Pathfinder 1 is fully electric. The originals relied on internal combustion. And it comes from a company called LTA Research. LTA stands for lighter than air. Helium, in other words. Having already acquired the Airdock in 2022, they're now also operating from Moffett Field as a tenant. And they also have ties with Google. LTA is funded by Sergey Brin, who launched the tech giant alongside Larry Page. But the firm isn't operating out of Hangar One, or at least they haven't said they are. Instead, they've been using Hangar 2 to build and store their impressive new creation.
Which, as of right now, is still a prototype. Still, the fact they've managed to get one in the air shows that what they're doing is possible and could be about to scale up. Because the reason the LTA bought the Airdock is to develop an even bigger airship, which Barry believes could be the answer to Hangar One's big secret.
I think it's going back for airships, and they definitely want to build airships. And I think they look at building very big airships. And here is a very large hangar, which is what you need for a very large airship. There's no reason that airship hangar now won't last another 100 years. They're very well built structures in the first place.
Indeed, it's just one of a series of historic megastructures that have managed to survive well into the 21st century, all while staying at the forefront of engineering, filmmaking, aquatic entertainment, and other things, despite their original purpose dying out. Or is there another option? Are we about to see an airship resurrection, especially when LTA isn't the only company that's trying to bring them back? Barry is very confident of that, although most likely as a way of moving freight for the time being.
I think they're going to be mainly used for cargo, and that's simply because you can carry very big loads and you can cross oceans at low cost. Whether we'll get back to crossing oceans in airships as passengers, I'm not so sure. It's hard to think of a day when we won't have passenger jets. But you never know whether the airship might find itself in that position again.
This video was sponsored by Rayon Design. Don't forget that you can go and try out Rayon Design for free yourself by clicking the link in the video description. It is video sponsors like Rayon that help us continue to produce these great videos, and it really helps us out at this channel when you guys take the time to go and take a look at our video sponsors, so please do click on that link. And as always guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to keep the B1M flying high, hit that subscribe button.